And we begin this morning with the January 6th committee's final public hearing.
Yeah, the panel is preparing to deliver closing arguments in its investigation, wrapping up an 18-month probe ahead of the release of its final report later this week. It's also expected to vote on a number of referrals, asking the Justice Department to pursue criminal charges against former President Donald Trump.
This is someone who tried to interfere with a joint session, even inciting a mob to attack the Capitol. If that's not criminal, then I don't know what is.
Joining us now to break all of this down is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale and NBC News legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Ali, let's start with you because I know you have some exclusive reporting. I mean, what should we be watching for today as the committee makes its final case about the January 6th attacks?
Well, Joe, NBC probably has a better sense than anyone else out there of what we're going to see, because I was able to overhear yesterday with my colleagues Kate Santeles and Haley Talbot the actual dress rehearsal from the January 6th committee, each member ticking through the portions of the hearing that they are going to be the ones commanding. Many of the themes are going to be ones that we've heard before, including the pressure campaign on Mike Pence, the far-right extremist groups that came to the Capitol on January 6th. But of course, the culmination is going to be what referrals this committee makes. And we have a good sense now, after overhearing in that room, they're going to be charging former President Donald Trump with 3 criminal referrals, specifically on the grounds of obstructing an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the government, and inciting or assisting an insurrection. That last one is one that was the topic of much discussion within the committee. As I've been tracking what their final report was going to include, that was one of the live balls that members were actively discussing. So now we do know that insurrection will likely be part of the criminal referrals that the committee ends up putting forward and voting on today. Look, as Glenn will tell you, there's no legal weight behind this, but certainly in the court of public opinion that this committee has been operating within, it will carry weight that this is the first time that a congressional committee will criminally refer a former president. So really a stunning point of history there. And then there was also the open question of what would happen to the congressional lawmakers who defied their subpoenas. This has even less teeth, frankly, because the committee saying yesterday they're likely to refer to the House Ethics Committee 4 of the 5 congressmen who defied their subpoenas. But look, House Ethics ends at the end of the year when this Congress does. It's evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. They would have to vote to keep this on the docket for the next Congress in order for it to stay alive and for these ethics referrals to actually mean something, because they probably can't do anything with them in the waning days that this Congress has left. But nevertheless, that's how they're going to deal with those Congress people.
Quite the preview there, Ali. And Glenn, let's bring you in here. As we reported, the committee expected to make the criminal and civil referrals against former President Trump. So can you explain exactly what those referrals are?
Yeah, so as Ali said, they really don't carry the force of weight. They don't have a whole lot of authority behind them. You know, I worked at the Department of Justice for decades. I can tell you how I would have received these criminal referrals. I would have put the information in 2 buckets. One bucket contained the evidence that the J6 committee has developed over the many months that they've been investigating the attack on the Capitol, the insurrection. And then in the other bucket, I would have put the J6 recommendations, the suggestions about who I should prosecute or what I should prosecute. I would be keenly interested in the evidence, because as a former prosecutor, I would take evidence from any source, but I would then have to test it for completeness, for truthfulness, and for accuracy, and then build on it. But when somebody else, an agency or an organization, even a co-equal branch of government like the legislative branch, makes a recommendation about who I should prosecute, I would probably be politely dismissive of that and say, thank you very much, but we will exercise our own independent prosecutorial discretion.
So, Ali, I mean, the committee is also considering referrals for close allies of the former president. Who are they? What could they possibly be facing?
Yeah, the who are they question is one that we can probably guess, but not going to know officially until later today. One of the names that we heard the committee discussing yesterday, unsurprisingly, was John Eastman, the Trump allied lawyer, who was a key part of both the fake electors scheme and also the pressure campaign on former Vice President Mike Pence. It's a name that we've heard often, but there are certainly many others that we've heard over the course of these many hearings that we're likely to hear again today. People that I'm thinking about are Rudy Giuliani, former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, others within the orbit. And then there's the question of if this committee will go as far as to do referrals on the grounds of people who may have lied or been mistruthful with Congress. We know that there are some questions about people who they have heard from in the past, whether or not they were telling the whole truth. One of the people that comes to mind for me is Tony Ornato, one of those key agents in the Cassidy Hutchinson testimony who was around the former president on January 6th and could speak specifically to what may have happened in that presidential vehicle where Cassidy Hutchinson testified under oath that he lunged at his Secret Service detail in wanting to go to the Capitol that day. She was told that secondhand, but at the same time, they have talked to some of the key players there. I'm wondering if we get any more on that. But there's also the likelihood, in addition to these ethics committee referrals and criminal referrals, that we also see referrals to bar associations for lawyers who were involved in this and who the committee thinks they have evidence of doing something unethical or even potentially illegal. That's another kind of referral we might see today.
So, Glenn, as all this is going on, we know the Justice Department also obviously conducting an investigation into January 6th. Attorney General Merrick Garland will ultimately make the call on whether the department brings charges. So what factors will he consider before making that big decision?
You know, he's going to consider the facts and the law. Hopefully they are going to completely block out outside influence, even public opinion. And then some people have suggested if charges are brought against Donald Trump, it would perhaps incite violence in, some segments of our nation. I think Merrick Garland and Jack Smith, who is now special counsel tasked with making that weighty decision and then forwarding it to Merrick Garland for a final decision, I think they will kind of tune all of that out, and they will do what they have always done, what prosecutors at DOJ are duty-bound to do: follow the facts, apply the law to those facts, and reach a prosecutorial decision based on the evidence, not based on outside influence.
A lot to come on that. Allie, Glenn, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard from West Palm Beach, Florida. Vaughn, good morning. Good to have you with us. So first of all, let's sort of walk through how we got to this point today. I mean, what were some of the biggest moments that we've actually seen from this January 6th committee so far?
Joe, you're talking about 10 public hearings over the course of the last year here. This was a committee that began its work in the summer of 2021. And the question was, how would they be able to lay out for the American public the details and evidence that all of us bear witness to with our own eyes on January 6th itself? And over the course of those 10 public hearings, they did just that, outlining how Trump allies were talking before Election Day of 2020 about how Donald Trump would declare victory on election night before the results even came in. And then you saw the committee outline evidence in which Donald Trump, despite the numbers and despite the evidence that was presented to him himself, continued to foment the election conspiracy theories. He then, over the course of those weeks before January 6th, him and allies put pressure on local elections officials as well as state government officials to overturn their state's election results. And then the committee outlined in one particular hearing how he pressured, they allege, former Vice President Mike Pence to not certify the election on January 6th of 2021. And then everything that came after. You heard from the Wisconsin Speaker of the House about how just even as late as this summer, Donald Trump was still pressuring him in the Wisconsin state legislature to overturn their results. They detailed over the course of those 10 public hearings quite damning evidence that Donald Trump did little to push back against.
And Vaughn, as we know, a lot of Trump's allies have stuck by the former president throughout these hearings. What are we hearing from them leading up to the referral announcement?
We're hearing a lot of silence here at this point. The Republicans, allies of Donald Trump, chose not to sit on this January 6th Select Committee, and that's why you saw the likes of Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, the two Republicans who willfully joined this committee, much to the chagrin of Donald Trump. But among allies, Kevin McCarthy being one of them, the potential House Speaker in this next legislative session, he actually wrote a letter 2 weeks ago to this January 6th committee telling them that they need to hold on to all evidence because the Republican-led House, under his potential leadership, intends to investigate the January 6th Select Committee's investigation. They have called this a political ploy to take down the former Republican president. Of course, again, Donald Trump declined the opportunities and the subpoena presented by this committee to share his side of the story and testify under oath. And again, largely Republicans have done little to defend Donald Trump on the specific merits, instead suggesting that this was a moment in time and that the country should move forward instead of looking so heavily back on the past.
And Vaughn, real quickly, a question a lot of people keep asking is looking ahead to 2024. I mean, what does this all mean for Trump's presidential bid, which he already announced, especially if the Justice Department does charge him?
Right. There is, when you're looking at these three potential criminal referrals, there is one in which it has to do with the criminal statute regarding the incitement of an insurrection. And I just want to read you in part. That part here says, as I'm actually pulling up my notes, don't have it in front of me. Apologies, guys. Actually, I do have it here. The quote from the federal statute says, whoever incites, sets foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion and insurrection against the authority of the U.S. or the laws thereof, gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years, or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. Now, there's a lot of legal scholars who say that the U.S. Constitution does not allow, under this particular criminal statute, for an individual to be prevented from running and seeking and ultimately holding the office of the presidency again. But instead, this statute is directed more towards an individual who could be appointed to an executive or judicial branch position. But again, when you're looking at this particular statute, there are legal questions about whether that could bar the former president from serving in the White House again, guys.
Ron, I can only imagine how many notes you have in front of you and in your head right now. As always, we appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much. Be sure to keep up with our continuing coverage of the January 6th committee's final meeting, kicking off at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time right here on NBC News Now. Turning to the crisis at the border, a state of emergency is in effect for El Paso, Texas, as the city prepares for a major wave of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexican border. Now, critics are saying things may get worse as the Trump-era border restriction known as Title 42 is set to end on Wednesday. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the latest.
Even for a region used to daily border crossings, this was unusually large. Hundreds of migrants lining up to turn themselves in to U.S. Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas. Desperation in the desert.
It's right before dawn, and the conditions here are miserable. With the wind chill, the temperature here feels like it's below freezing. The Border Patrol is letting 10 to 15 of these migrants in at a time, but the line stretches all the way down there, so it's likely they'll be waiting here for hours.
The new influx comes just days before a federal court ordered that a pandemic-era border restriction known as Title 42 be lifted. Implemented by the Trump administration in 2020, the policy gave the government authority to turn away migrants, including asylum seekers, at the border, citing the need to prevent COVID from spreading inside the country. Republican-led states sued to keep Title 42 in place, but the D.C. Circuit Court ruled against them Friday night.
The Biden administration is failing at their primary constitutional duty, maintaining the security and sovereignty of our great nation.
This past fiscal year, there were a record 2.4 million apprehensions at the southern border. But some officials in border communities worry that when Title 42 is lifted, they'll see potentially thousands more each day.
It is a crisis. It is a state of emergency. There's no municipality alone that could handle what we're seeing and what we're about to see with the lifting of Title 42.
Already, more migrants are ending up here on the streets of El Paso while they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. Teresa Perez from Nicaragua tells us she's trying to reach friends in Florida, but doesn't know how she'll pay for the trip. Lenin Antonio Calderon told us he and others were kidnapped by suspected cartel members in central Mexico. He showed us this video he says he shot on his cell phone of the chaos as the Mexican military swooped in to rescue them.
This is something that is beyond comprehension.
Fernando Garcia is a migrant advocate who's pleading for Congress to take action.
Both parties are responsible of the situation. I think without doubt. Throughout the years, there's been no immigration reform. Instead of revamping the asylum process, it's been destroyed.
Ruben Garcia runs a longtime shelter in El Paso.
What we're seeing now has been seen by the Obama administration. It was seen by the Trump administration. It was seen by the Biden administration. And the worst part of that are the politicians who use it for political gain. That is beyond unconscionable that people would do that with human lives.
Local officials here say this is a humanitarian crisis that has been building for years. And with no clear plan, they say, from the federal government, it's reaching an inflection point.
All right, Gabe, thank you.
Well, Argentina has been crowned champion after beating France in yesterday's thrilling World Cup final. France were down 2-0 with 10 minutes to go before they scored 2 rapid-fire goals to force extra time. The match then ended 3-3 after both sides netted another goal. The game was then settled in a dramatic penalty shootout, with Argentina, of course, coming out on top. Joining us now to break this all down is Paul Tenorio, he's a senior soccer writer for The Athletic. Paul, good morning to you. This really was an incredible, exciting match, full of twists and turns right until the very last minute. So was this actually one of the World Cup great finals, as many people have been saying?
Yeah, I think you have to think of it as one of the great finals that's ever been played when you consider the drama of the game. As you mentioned, the 2 late goals from Kylian Mbappe to pull France level, 2 goals traded back and forth in extra time, and then the penalty shootout. And of course, the stakes of the game and what it meant. Lionel Messi trying to cement his legacy, Kylian Mbappe trying to win his 2nd World Cup at just the age of 23. 5 goals between those 2 players, 2 players who I think will be remembered in this game for a long time. Just sheer drama, and also it was just a fun game to watch. And for that reason, I think this World Cup final will be remembered for a very, very long time.
And you mentioned Lionel Messi. The World Cup was the last major tournament he had not won. We know, of course, he's wanted that trophy for some time now. Now he's got his hands on it. Does this finally settle the debate on whether he's one of the greatest soccer players of all time?
Well, I'm one of the people who believed that Messi did not need a World Cup final to cement his legacy as the greatest to ever play. But many people did. Many felt that this was the trophy that says that you are a great player, not just at the club level, but at the international level, that you could never be considered the greatest of all time without a World Cup. Well, now he has that World Cup, and we've seen the way that Messi has influenced this game since he broke into the senior level of football. This is the first player who scored a goal in a World Cup as a teenager, in his 20s and his 30s. This World Cup, he became the first player ever to score at the group stage, the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the final. We know what he's done with Barcelona in his club career. And I think when you saw last night what this meant to Lionel Messi as well, to get this title, he understood that this is what people were asking of him, that this is the last thing he needed to deliver for his country. And I think after last night's performance, the way he influenced the game, the goals that he scored in big moments for Argentina throughout this tournament, I don't think you can make an argument now that there's any other player that is greater than Lionel Messi, that's done more than what he's done at both the club and the international level. And I thought the final, the way it went, was the perfect way to cement that legacy. The fact that he scored that goal in extra time, that he converted his penalty, it was a performance for the ages, for sure.
Pretty well cemented there. And let's talk a little bit about France. Obviously, hugely disappointing outcome for the defending champions, despite another fantastic performance from their star player, Mbappe. He ended up as the tournament's top scorer. So where does all this leave the French team now?
Well, I think it'll take some time for the pain to fade away. But when you pull back and you consider how difficult it is for teams that have won a World Cup to even to get to this stage. Many teams that win World Cup fail to get out of the group stage in the next tournament. France, they suffered several injuries in the lead up to the tournament, and yet they got back to the World Cup final. It was a fantastic tournament for this team. The fact that they fought back in a game that they largely were out of. Argentina dominated the vast majority of this game through about 70, 75 minutes. And then Mbappe he was the magic man. The way he scored that second goal, especially the side volley, was incredible. He's just 23 years old. It's easy to forget that because he's been so influential in this game already. And I think anyone will tell you that the depth of this France team, the talent that keeps coming through that country, they're going to be around in every single World Cup, especially considering that Mbappe is going to be there for a while longer. So I think despite the disappointment of a second place finish, overall, a very strong tournament for France. And I think a lot to look forward to when you look again at this roster and the players that they have coming through.
Just 23 years old, Mbappe's got a lot of playing left in him. Paul Tenorio, thanks so much.
At least 36 people were injured after a flight from Phoenix to Honolulu hit such severe turbulence it threw passengers out of their seats. Here's what it looked like inside the plane. The turbulence came out of nowhere, according to passengers on board. Officials say it is rare to experience such extreme levels of turbulence, which lasted for about 30 minutes on this flight. An emergency services spokesperson says 11 of the injured were hospitalized in serious condition. A Hawaiian Air official says the fasten seatbelt sign was on when the plane hit the turbulence. An investigation is underway to determine exactly what happened. Time now for a check on your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with more. Good morning, Angie.
Good morning, guys. And we are just so close to Christmas. Lots to do. I'm sure a lot of people running some last-minute errands. So let's give you a bit of an overview of what this week ahead will look like. Where you want to be today, I think the Southwest looks gorgeous. Lots of sunshine. Temperatures are mild into the mid-50s as you look into parts of California. A bit of a different story as we look into the northern tier of the country. The frigid temperatures are out there. They're dealing with temperatures into the single digits for much of the next couple of days and into the end of the work week. As we look through tomorrow, snow, bitter cold takes hold of not just the high plains, but really that'll dip down into parts of the south, and that'll be what we'll talk about here as we get into the midweek and beyond. Deep freeze for Friday as we look to parts of the south. So already we're seeing those watches, warnings, and advisories up when it comes to wind chill. You can see they spread across the Dakotas and into parts of Colorado. We could be dealing with wind chills as low as 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60 degrees below. So this is a really dangerous situation when it comes to our temperatures over the next couple of days. And again, this is long lasting. We'll likely see more of those alerts start to pop up as we get into the next couple of days. In the meantime, here's what we're looking at for today. Just a high of 1 degree for Bismarck this afternoon. Sioux Falls coming in at 10 degrees. We'll be dealing with 20s in places like Kansas City and Madison. And as we look out towards the northeast, notice the temperature changes that we'll experience here over Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We look at Pittsburgh on Thursday, 41, but by Saturday it is at 14 degrees. Similar story for Richmond. New York will be into the 50s for Thursday and Friday, but end up into the mid-20s by the time the weekend rolls around. That sets us up for basically a cold Christmas no matter where you look. Even places like Miami will see temperatures into the 40s. So really cold air starting to settle in, and I know a lot of people are going to wonder, are we going to have a white Christmas? Well, the answer is yes. For some locations like the Midwest, we'll have a big storm system that'll work across parts of the central parts of the United States and then eventually work into the Midwest, and that brings a mix of some snow and rain. Problematic for anyone that may be traveling through or to places like Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Louis, even Detroit. We'll see rain for the Northeast, but that'll eventually, guys, transition over into snow for the interior areas. So, you know, a mixed bag. Whatever you want, we've got it going on across the country.
Good if you want a white Christmas, but 50 to 60 below wind chills, no one wants that.
No, and really dangerous for livestock, pets. You just want to check on everybody, I think, is the best.
Thanks, Angie.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.